legal and finance are two areas that can sort of bite you in the back if you've not done things properly. Really nasty terms in NDAs, and you might think, yeah, I'm going to get £50 back from HMRC because of my R&D tax calculation, but if you haven't done the calculation properly, then actually it will cost you a lot more than.
Welcome to Money at Work. I'm very excited to have a friend and as well as the CEO of TextMine. How are you doing, Charles?
Great. Thank you very much, Daniel, for having me. And I know you just got off a flight, so I hope you're okay doing this.
Yeah. So for everybody, I just came from Mexico. I went to see my grandma. I took her to the aquarium, and I just landed from Heathrow Airport today at 7 a.m. in the morning. But I have a cup of tea. I had 2 espressos already and a burger because we got a new BDR who we took to Honest Burgers. So I'm really well. How are you doing? How are you doing? Good?
Yeah, great. And hopefully, this will be a smooth podcast and not too much work for you.
Nah, it's gonna be good. So tell us more about TextMine. I know now the company's called TextMine, which is pretty exciting. Before it was called Legislate. So maybe walk us through a little bit of the story of what was Legislate, what is TextMine now, and why TextMine?
Yeah, I think changing the name of the company is obviously a big thing, but at the end of the day, we're still doing the same thing, which is structuring unstructured data in documents. We started with contracts, and we did this firstly by providing a platform for users to create contracts with structured data in them. But with the rise of LLMs, we've actually been able to broaden that to documents that have already been signed and that are just collecting dust in a drive or in folders. So really what we're trying to do is extract key terms, answers about documents that, yes, a company might be very well organized and might have a drive with lots of folders and subfolders, but whenever you want to answer a question about your contracts or documents, the only way to do that is to manually go through every single one by one, manually extract the data, put it in a spreadsheet, and hope that throughout this process you haven't made any mistakes. And that repeats itself whenever a new question comes up. And so ultimately what we do is we automate that step of extracting insights from text and presenting them in a nice dashboard where you can search and get the reports and metrics you need to sort of make proactive decisions about your documents.
Amazing. How long is the company going for?
This is our 4th year.
Okay, so at the 4th year, you changed the name. How you feel? Was it a bit of I'll miss you, baby, or more like the baby just became a teenager and now things are, for the next round?
I think the timing definitely feels right. The thing about Legislate, it is a great name, and we definitely set out to sort of focus on contracts from the beginning. And Legislate, because it's such a great name, such a legal name, it creates a lot of confusion with our potential customers or existing customers, because it doesn't say what we do, and it's also a name which people just assume means that the company works with lawyers or is a legal company. But I'm not a lawyer, and we're not yes, we deal with contracts and we make it easy to create and manage the contracts, but we've always felt a little bit like an outsider when it comes to the legal tech industry, because a lot of legal tech is focused on optimizing lawyers or making legal teams more efficient. Whereas our focus is making the COO, CFO, the operations teams better at managing the data in their supply agreements when it comes to renewals, or break clauses, when it comes to client agreements. That's sort of where we sort of have always focused. And now it just makes sense to do it.
I completely get it. One of the challenges we face sometimes with payable is that the word payable, it just makes you think about AP, which is accounts payable. Whereas, with payable, we do treasury, cash management, reconciliation. The idea is to create that back office tooling for the CFO, where all the finance team can just collaborate around their finances. But payable is just a vertical or a slice of the whole finance domain. We have bigger problems right now on trying to figure out product market fit and scaling customers, scaling the team. So we're thinking to change the name later when we do the next round. But I completely get it, right? You send a message, the ICP, the ideal customer profile, receives the message, but then suddenly could be thinking, oh, this is great. Let me maybe send you to my legal team. And you're like, no. I want to actually talk to you because you're the operations or the COO.
Exactly. And I think what's also great is we managed to get the .com. And,
No way, that's amazing.
And I know the .com might seem like a bit of a vanity metric, but when you receive an email, a cold email from a .com, it all of a sudden elevates your brand in the eyes of the person receiving that cold email.
100%.
I was looking at, even when I'm reaching out to companies, I can just see .com because they're established companies, they're mature, they figured everything out. And we obviously aspire to be mature and have everything figured out. But having that .com should hopefully help as well.
No, I 100% agree with you. We would love to own paypal.com, but we have to chat with our friends of Stripe that own the paypal.com domain. So that's for another story. What's your background? What's your role? I know you're the founder, the CEO, but what does that even mean, right? Every CEO, I guess, runs a company in different ways. Some are very product-driven, sales-driven, and sometimes finance. It depends on the needs of the company. So what is your background? You say you're not a lawyer. And what do you do every day? What is a day in the life of Charles?
Yeah, so I studied engineering, joined a AI spin-out from Oxford, originally data science, and then moved into biz dev. And I guess I've always considered myself a generalist. I just sort of crack on and do things. In the context of Legislate, it means wearing lots of hats. There have been times where I've been focused more on the product, times where I've been focused more on biz dev and sales. I'd say the one area where I don't get my hands, deep is more on the legal side or on the HR. I've got my co-founder Amber, who's there, and also our chief legal officer, Mary Catherine, to sort of support me on that. And then I think, finance is obviously an area where I feel like I've got too much responsibility. But I'd say my biggest challenge is definitely trying to figure out where should I be focusing my time and energy. And I sometimes do get sucked into things, whether it's, SEO or product or whatever. And it's always a question of, well, what is moving the needle for the business? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And I guess my biggest fear is, am I spending too much time doing something which isn't moving the needle? Whether that's in any department. Yeah,
so it's hard because you can be rabbit holing on something that you believe will yield a lot of gains or revenue, or it's a good use of your time, but then you have to realize and say, maybe I should hire someone or delegate it or pass it to someone. So you focus your time in maybe product or sales where you can move the needle even more. We chatted with a lot of people on the finance domain where, we chatted with a great guy, a friend, Drew, where he was an early hire at Wise, and then brought the company to be listed here in the London Stock Exchange. And you, as a founder, you have to deal with the finance function. As you say, it's something that you carry a lot of weight and responsibility because it's something that you are in some way running. And there are a lot of founders out there listening to us. What's your advice? What have you learned? What are the tips that you can share about building a company and also thinking about the finance function when you have these other areas that you also need to be spending time on?
Yeah, I think someone told me that there are two areas where you got to do it properly, which is finance and legal. Meaning, if you're getting investors, make sure that you've got lawyers to review the subscription agreement, or if you've got money in the bank and you've got to spend it, make sure that you are keeping track of what you're spending, or that because at the end of the day, legal and finance are two areas that can sort of bite you in the back if you've not done things properly. Because on a day-to-day, you don't necessarily need to worry about it, because yes, you can tap the card or authorize a payment or whatever, money goes out or money goes in, etc. Same with legal, you can sign a contract, but if you've signed a contract with the wrong terms, or if you've sent money to the wrong, I don't know, I'm not necessarily a finance expert, so I can't go into bad financial situations, but the basically on a day-to-day it doesn't matter. It can seem like it doesn't matter, but it's always in the long run when things don't go to plan that you wish that you'd done things properly, basically.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's something that I was talking to one of our engineers, and we discussed about daily efforts and every daily effort compounds in greater efforts or outcomes. That could be just, going for a small run, a small walk, and then suddenly a month later you can actually run really well. I know you love Rebel One or One Rebel and a bunch of
Barry's.
Barry's. Yeah. I know you have a love for Barry's. I can sneak her in also supporting the brand. But it is the daily things that happen that could change how you can get affected. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the legal side, because I think in the money side and the finance side, there's many things that you can spend as a company or even as an individual that you might not see, £20 in OpenAI, and then suddenly everyone in the company has that £20 per month, right? And then suddenly you have to go and review how you're actually managing the money.
And even things like claiming back VAT. I mean, now that we've got proper bookkeepers, I realize actually we can't claim VAT for here. And but in the early days, you sort of say, "Yep, there's VAT, I can claim it." But then if it's not the right code or whatever, then you can't. And I think HMRC have done a great job at making things digital, and there's to a certain extent implicit trust in everyone doing things properly. But if you haven't done things properly, they might pick up on that in it might even just be a random audit. And that, is an example where it will bite you back and you wish you'd done things properly.
Yeah, 100%. Even for us, when we raise the round, we didn't raise on a safe, we raised on an equity round. So we had to have all the legal docs ready. Also, all the shares options and everything on the legal and finance side, and as well with HMRC. We got the EMI scheme. The EMI scheme, for not everybody to know, is it gives employees part of the shares tax benefit as well. But we go into the business, we start trying to build product, and buy here things in there, and then you will go and fundraise for Series A or an extension, and you will get audited, so they know where you're spending your money, right? Are you spending too much money in marketing, or operations, or product, or R&D? And if you don't do that every day, every month, then you are a year in, and then you cannot fundraise because you get audited and you don't have your books in the right way. So something needs to happen every day. How does that happen on the legal side? I know you mentioned, hey, having your legal, legal and finance can always, bite you back. So you should have a daily hygiene of legal and finance. How does it work in the, not legal department, but more as a overall contracts and documents?
I think, obviously there's certain documents which are specific to certain companies, and every company is different. But I think one example or two examples where things should be done properly. One is employment contracts or consultancy agreements. If you're, depending on how you're hiring, you want to make sure that the company is retaining the IP, because that's a big red flag if ever you do get audited. Imagine an investor coming to invest in the round thinking, oh, great, there's this amazing product, amazing IP, but the company doesn't actually own it. Well, why should they invest in you? That's one example. But then the other example is NDAs. And I think, I don't know if it's the VC's fault or whose fault it is, but there's this sort of general consensus that NDAs are not important. VCs don't sign NDAs. Therefore, why should a company sign an NDA? The reason why VCs don't sign an NDA is very different, from why a company should or shouldn't sign an NDA. But the thing about NDAs is they're so standard, so generic, but they are important. Meaning, if you don't sign an NDA when speaking to potential partners or competitors or anyone, then ultimately nothing's stopping them from doing what you're doing. But secondly, when you do sign an NDA, you always want to get that NDA reviewed by someone. And I know lots of people say that they've seen lots of NDAs and they all understand everything. But there's some really nasty terms in NDAs, whether it's a non-compete, and a non-compete might sound like, we're never going to compete with this potential customers of ours because, maybe they're in the waste management industry and we're a fintech. But a non-compete is something that you need to declare in your funding round, the upcoming funding round. And then investors might say, well, because of that non-compete, it means that your TAM is not actually what you've said. It's only, 70% of that. IP rights, NDAs is a tricky one. Or even, when you're signing an NDA, everything might be good, but if it doesn't say, if you don't explicitly state that something's confidential, then it doesn't fall under the NDA.
Maybe the time for the NDA lasts not only maybe 2, 3, 5 years, could be 10 years or without any time restriction.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are NDAs that don't have an expiry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's not that, there are obviously valid reasons for all of these terms, but I just think it's something where you should have the lawyer review it every single time there's an NDA to review. If you have someone that you work with closely, they will yes, it might add 1 or 2 days to the process, but it will just guarantee that what you're signing is good for your company.
Yeah, and for everybody, TAM is the total addressable market. That means, maybe you're fundraising and you say, hey, we can build all of these products or these verticals or anywhere in the industry or space, but you can have a legal agreement or an NDA or something that is just maybe preventing you to do something like this, so it could block you in the outcome of building something new, which is super important to keep in track. What do you think in your 4 years of Legislate now, TextMine has been one of the biggest challenges? And on the other side, what is one memory that you cherish a lot? I know as a founder, you get a lot of memories because I have a lot of memories, and we've been built a bit over a year and a half. So biggest challenge and a memory that you really, carry or cherish a lot.
I think the challenge is either fundraising or getting customers. Obviously, if you get so many customers, you don't need to fundraise, which would be a nice problem to have. But I think when it comes to customers, and also going back to the earlier question around, why change the name after 4 years, the reality is when you set off to solve a problem, the solution you build sort of unlocks more problems, and you sort of go down, you're opening up the market. You're sort of realizing that actually, yes, this problem that we solved is a problem for our clients, but there's this other problem that you can only really think of or address if you've solved this first problem. And I feel like because we've been very focused on legal documents and contracts, where, you can't go as quickly because of the implications of a contract going wrong, etc. You want to do things at the right pace, and properly. So I feel like we've, gradually been chipping away at this problem, and then now realize that actually the real big problem is unstructured data in documents that have already been signed. And then how do we connect that data to, your Xero, to your HR? That's ultimately been the core problem, but we've only just got there. But I think now it's very much around, there's lots of interest in the solution. How do we get enough early adopters to sort of just crack on with it? Let's build the use cases with them. Let's prove the ROI, and let's leverage that to go after the bigger enterprises that, in our case, have hundreds and thousands of PDF documents sitting in folders all over the place, but they just don't really know what's in them. And then memory. I don't know, but there are so many. I've waffled for so long. So yeah,
there has to be one. I remember when we signed our first employee joining or our first customer. I don't know if fundraising, even though we fundraise, I guess, in a good way. I think I was excited, but it was not the same excitement as signing the first customer or having someone that believed in us to join the company when we had nothing. Anything that you can share?
The thing is, I just feel like obviously it's like a roller coaster, but everything's moving so quickly that we only did our 3 million funding round in March, which is 7 months ago, and it feels like so much has happened since. Obviously, that was a key achievement because it was the first time we'd raised that much money. It really helped us sort of become a whole different caliber of company because we went from 8 to 18, and we were able to sort of do things properly. Before we'd been very scrappy and capital efficient. We're still scrappy and capital efficient, but we're able to take slightly more expensive bets to sort of help us get to our goal. But now that we're past that, it's more like, getting customers, hiring employees, all of that's great. But it's all a bit of a blur right now.
Do you think the finance, the way you were doing your cash, changed from being 8 to raising 3 million?
Absolutely. And even the money in the bank, because prior to that, we'd done £1 million round 2 years before. And so we made £1 million last 2 years. Then we did the £3 million round. And for me, that was a big number. And I wanted to sort of get our finance stack back on track. I mean, it's not that it wasn't on track, but so we got a proper bookkeeper. We changed our accountants because, we'd gone from the very, very cheap accountants that were, good, in the early days. And so we changed our accountants. We did try to find a fractional CFO. In the end, we didn't, just because felt that actually we're a bit too early for that.
Could you expand more? I think that would be a good advice for many founders that are trying to figure out the finance function.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's my fault, but I just hate spending money when I can't see an ROI. And I think a CFO can definitely help you bring an ROI to your company, but the reality is they're not cheap. And at least based on the interest rates, obviously the CFOs will say, we will cover our costs by helping you generate that money back. But the reality is with £3 million, just leaving it in the bank, maybe that's what they would have suggested, and etc. And then the other thing for us is because with this funding round, we completely also changed our ICP focus. We had to build a lot. We anticipated that there'd be a drop in, commercial activity because we had to sort of shut off a whole bunch of, existing customers, build, and then go back to market. So that's why we sort of decided, actually, let's hold off. And then when we do get more customers and more repeatability, then we'll get a CFO, because I do think in anticipation of the next round, we'd want to have everything, really strong financial models. And a financial model might sound a bit like a overly used word, but it's really proving to investors that this is a fundable business that will generate a return for them. I think in the early days of the company, you can always sell the vision, the market, and everything makes sense. But the reality is that, and we're sort of seeing it now with all these big companies collapsing, if the unit economics don't work, or maybe the unit economics do work, but if there isn't sort of enough scale or velocity or a mechanism for this company to become a ginormous cash cow, it's very hard for investors to sort of want to fund you. And I think having a CFO or someone with CFO expertise to sort of build that business, that financial model for you, but also coach you to get it towards that, because it might be that actually this business model isn't right. It should be a different one. And I think having someone with that finance lens is really useful.
I know you just closed your round a couple of months ago, which is pretty exciting. And I remember when you were telling me the stories, how you were navigating everything. Any advice for the founders out there in the world now trying to close a round? Feels like the market is getting a little bit better. But yeah, any advice for founders out there listening to us?
I think you can waste a lot of time throughout a funding round process, whether it's speaking to investors who don't actually invest in your type of company. So I think for me, I should have done more research in terms of who to speak to, what do they invest in, what are they looking for? Because a lot of companies, even though they say that they invest at early stage, it might be that actually they invest at early stage when there's an inflection point and you're already sort of past that inflection point. Or it might be that they invest at early stage, but they expect $1 million in ARR. These are all sort of maybe filters that they use as a way of sort of rejecting companies that they don't like. But I think investors will never change their mind, and you really need to fit within their thesis and what they're looking for to sort of even get to the next step of speaking to a partner or going to IC or having some form of due diligence. So I think you as a company might change throughout that funding round process. I mean, we definitely made tweaks to our pitch and adapted our story to fit within these frameworks that we were sort of realizing we were getting sort of positive signals from. But I think it was for the better, because going back to, what makes a company fundable? Well, it needs to make the investor a return, and sometimes you do need to sort of change your story or make changes to your business to sort of align with that. But I think it's just making sure that you're speaking to the right investors, because otherwise you spend your time explaining the market, explaining what you do, explaining why you should exist.
And they get lost in the maybe details.
Yeah, and it's just a massive waste of time and energy. So you really want to speak with investors that understand your space, ideally know you. Yeah. That's my, and then actually the other tip, maybe I haven't done it, but you have, would be to raise from the US.
Yeah, it changes the game a lot. Yeah, they move faster.
Yeah,
they increase conviction. They do bigger bets. It's funny because a friend of mine, he's an angel, and he asked me, "Hey, who are your competitors?" And I said, "Well, it depends. Is it on the investor lens or customer lens?" Because those two things differ. Sometimes they get merged, but for us, we have certain competitors that we are portrayed in the investor thesis.
Yeah.
But actually, when you're there doing sales, none of our competitors are actually there, which is very fascinating. So that matters, because when you go out there in the world and then you go and fundraise, you need to use the cards available to you to feed in that thesis, because sometimes for the investor to understand the details of the market, every day we're doing our jobs to build the best company we can, and they will never have enough time to do all the due diligence to really go into all those details. So we need to surface that in a way that they can think about in their own thesis. And also, just for people, IC means investment committee. So yeah.
Thank you for picking up on all the acronyms.
It's because I know sometimes we never know who's going to be listening there.
Yeah.
So it's always important to just mention that the acronyms. What is an advice that you received in your career, something that you remember and you said, "Oh wow, that really changed you," either as a founder or maybe early in your career?
I think not making enemies or unnecessary enemies. I think straight out of uni, got a great job, and I was a big fish in a small pond at a startup, and I think that was my only professional experience, and I definitely felt like I was the king of the world because I was smashing it and all of that. But and I think it's very easy to sort of think because you're doing great, you are great, and that also might offend people. You might be a bit too cocky or whatever, and I think that was also the first time I sort of got exposed to actually inefficiencies in business, and I might have maybe expressed my frustrations a bit too much, because if I'm super efficient and they're super inefficient, let me sort of tell them how they should do their job. And I think the reality is well, A, you don't know why people are a certain way, and you don't see everything, but B, you just don't want to make enemies, because it makes it harder for people to want to do business with you if you have a reputation, which might or might not be justified. And I think especially when it comes to being a founder, being in an ecosystem, it's all about the network, and it's not that you're my friend and you're going to help me grow my business. It's more we're part of a community, for example, here in London, all trying to build businesses. We learn from each other. We share tips with each other. We share what has worked, what hasn't worked. And if I have a reputation of taking your ideas or like sabotaging, with bad, it just, no one will want to touch you. And I think, I think just no need to make enemies.
I remember one of my mentors said, your career will be longer than your company. So that means, I'm a competitive person, same as you. You want to build the best thing you can. So when you are first-time founder, at least for me, at the very beginning of the career, was like, it's us against the world and fighting against the world and blah, blah, blah. But then you realize that what really matters is every day showing up and do the work and do the job, and then just do it again and again and again and again. And if you do it long enough to be default alive, you'll be alive to actually be there. Whereas whoever is trying to build a new payable, if they don't work hard enough, they won't get there. And it's so fascinating because I got friends in Brazil. They are building literally payable in Brazil, and we catch up every month and a half or so. They want to know more what we're doing. I had a chat with Mon Treasure as well, with the CEO there, and we're all trying to change knots so we can build the best ecosystem we can in this case, treasury industry. But yeah, you don't have to be creating enemies out of nothing. I was watching the movie called Founder, I think, from McDonald's. I don't know if you watch on Netflix. I don't know if you ever watched this. I don't know if you ever watched it, but it's this guy that literally steals the idea from the two founders of McDonald's, and he was a savage, right? So there's always this kind of like balance of, which I always wonder, right? What is the limits of creating enemies to build the best company you can build versus being kind and help others and build the ecosystem, but you also have to be competitive because the world, it is also competitive. So,
yeah, I think it's all about just doing what aligns with you as a person, because, you know, you can try and be a bad guy, but if you're a nice guy, it's not going to work. If you're a bad guy, then, you know, maybe it will work. I don't know.
Yeah. So you were saying that you changed the way funds work from when you were 8 people and then moved to 18, and because you raised that $3 million or pounds round. When you were 8, I would assume that you had to keep some sort of hygiene, financial hygiene, before you went to fundraise. Do you have any tips about, you know, what financial hygiene means to you, bad practices, or anything that you observed in your experience?
Yeah, I think the first step is always, you know, are you keeping track of the receipts and the invoices and reconciling in Xero or, you know, QuickBooks or whatever it is you use. It might sound like a tedious task, but it's important when it comes to claiming back VAT, and that's definitely something which I used to be on top of, and then as sort of day to day, and then we got a bookkeeper, and that's when I also realized that even though I was doing it, I was, you know, making mistakes, and obviously everything's corrected now, and in the grand scheme of things they weren't big, but I just think as a founder, time is precious, and I think it is important to sort of do it in the early days to understand how things work. But when you can afford to, then, you know, try and bring on a freelance bookkeeper to outsource that. And then I think the other financial hygiene pieces around just your accounts. Are you spending on? Is your spending on track or not? And the other area where I think founders do sometimes go a bit rogue is especially when it comes to R&D tax claims, because HMRC, they do inspect, they do double check, and you know, you might think, yeah, I'm going to get £50,000 back from HMRC because of my R&D tax calculation, but if you haven't done the calculation properly, then actually it will cost you a lot more than, you know, 50,000. So I think it's important to sort of get the basics right. You know, receipts, invoices, reconciliation, budgeting. But then, you know, afterwards, I think once you've done all of that, and if you still have time and it does make sense, then maybe try and optimize by buying treasuries or whatever it is. But the reality is there's so much value that you can just unlock just by focusing on the basics that you should do it. Yeah.
So you're basically saying track, analyze, and then maybe, invest in some way. It's fascinating because, every month I have to do the receipts and check everything. There's been months where I'm on it, and there was like 2 months that I was like, I just completely got lost, and it's like, I can't find this receipt, and it's just something that is annoying. But as you say, that's VAT that you can recover. That extends the wrong way. Even if it's £20 or it could be AWS, you need to do it just because it's good hygiene. Second, on the R&D, we're lucky we got like 150K or something of R&D back.
Wow.
So we got like a month and a half extra, 2 months of runway extra. But we had to work with some of the accountants and just to make sure we can do things in the right way. Yeah. I think from a budgeting perspective, we haven't done much. In general, we don't really spend that much money. Most of it costs is salaries. And the only one that is spending a lot of money is marketing, which is behind me. No, I'm joking. But yeah, in general, we haven't really done a lot of budgeting, but we keep mostly the same cost every month.
Just create some budget for TextMine. That's all you need.
It sounds like a perfect plan. Amazing. So what's coming next for TextMine, aka Legislate, now TextMine?
Yeah, I think a lot of change. As I said, as a company, we sort of matured a lot. A lot of this year was sort of going through the discovery process of who are we actually selling to, why do they like us, what are they buying, what is the value that we're unlocking. I think we've got answers to a lot of those questions now. That's why we're sort of changing our name. That's why we're sort of rebranding, and I think we've got lots of very, very exciting opportunities with some really interesting companies over the next 6-12 months. And I think things will pick up, and it'll just be more. But I think what is actually quite exciting about where we're at is we are pushing the boundaries of LLMs, and I know large language models have really sort of only been popularized since December last year with ChatGPT. But the reality is what OpenAI have done is amazing, but it's all hidden behind an API, which means that when users interact with it, everything seems perfect. But if as a company you want to integrate LLMs, build your own LLMs, you need to sort of work with open source models. There's Llama 2 from Facebook, Mistral. There's a whole bunch that they're almost like coming out. Twitter announced one this week, Grok. They're coming out every single week. But if you want to take that open source model and run it, first of all, just to run it, there's a huge amount of operational complexity to sort of get through. Secondly, once you've done that, if the reality is a chat interface is not necessarily what you as a business need. So there's a lot of things that you need to do to sort of get it to align. And what is exciting is because we've got our own ginormous database of legal documents, we've been able to sort of fine tune these open source models to very specific use cases, and we're sort of pushing the boundaries of what is possible. So there's lots of R&D going on. That's also unlocking a whole bunch of grant funding opportunities. But I do think next year, over the next 12 months, I'll be excited to see some of these ideas that we're talking about now on the the research side of, well, okay, let's take this LLM and have it communicate with this LLM so that we can answer these complicated questions. I think that's very exciting.
That's really cool. That's really exciting. Well, they can find you on textmine.com, right? Because now you're on .com.
Exactly.
Okay, and where they can find you? Twitter or X or LinkedIn on Charles?
Yeah, I've got a pretty unique and boring name, so you can search me and find me.
Amazing. So my last question is pizza or burger?
Pizza.
Pizza or taco?
Pizza.
Okay, right. Well, Charles, thank you so much for being here at Money at Work. It was a pleasure, and I hope I can see you soon.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.